Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Idea Roastery. I'm Jason.
And I'm Herman.
Herman, can you tell me about your ChatGPT moment?
Oh, the one where it happened, the one where I'm like, oh wow, this is a useful tool and not just
Yes.
cruft.
Was it the first time that you used it, or was it a little bit afterwards,
I
or what
remember
was
it
your?
was when I had an employee at the time, and I had just gotten access to GPT-4, and it had just written an article that was actually like possibly decent. Now that I've become accustomed to ChatGPT flavored text, it's not impressive at all. But back then, when it went and wrote a cohesive, in-depth look at something or other, I went and I sent it to Dante, and I'm like, dude, check this out. This was written by an AI. He's like, no, 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 no. Because the AI text before that that had impressed me was when someone had gotten an older AI to write something in the style of J.K. Rowling, and it
Mm,
looked and sounded like J.K. Rowling, but it had no direction, no point. It was just words jumbled together that made up sentences, but the sentences didn't mean anything. But it was in the st style of J.K. Rowling. But now it was like writing actual stuff. I'm like, wow, this is impressive. And then so many instances after that, I'm still impressed with these latest models, albeit in a like dystopian kind of way. I'm like, wow, it can do this better than lawyers now. Holy
yeah,
shit.
yeah. I think mine is probably, I guess, the same as like just asking it. I think I probably asked it some random questions, like just to see like whether it responds. I think my initial assumption going in is like it's just a better version of search. Um, I think the best GPT moment or like AI moment is more recently actually, because I was working on some client work for a customer. Um, and one thing that's really annoying is like if you've ever tried to debug like webhooks or like so within your code, if you're calling out to external services, you just want to like post it somewhere. And so this piece of code I was working on, it needed to have some sort of external endpoint to reach. And so I thought, what a good opportunity to use these AI agents that I've been finding on the internet. And so I got it started in Cursor, and I basically gave it a bunch of prompts, and I said, I want to create this. It's got to have this post endpoint, and it has to have an endpoint so I can use a test to fetch that result. And it basically wrote the entire thing in Go. And I had it like pushed. I pushed it into a Docker repo and published it, and it's available. I haven't really written any documentation around it so other people can use it, but it basically wrote exactly what I needed.
hmm
And I know Go, and I kind of could have done it, with a good couple of weeks, but it would literally took me like, less than an hour to do. Um, and I think that's one of my more recent like wow moments where it's like, it's actually super useful in building stuff that I want to do. But I guess the question comes is like, there's a lot of talk about AGI and super intelligence. Is like, what's the next step? Because I'm already impressed. What's going to be the next impressive thing or the next ChatGPT moment in your mind?
So I recently read an article by Sam Altman, uh, and he's become a very controversial character over the last couple of years, and whether you like him or not, definitively he's a bit of a fibber. He he bends the truth mightily. Anyhow, his article was making the case that uh, AGI is already here. It's just kind of boring and everyday. And I'm tempted to kind of agree with him to a certain extent. Is
That
that,
AGI. So you're saying AGI is already here?
yeah, to a certain extent, is like um, ChatGPT is better than the average person at everything, knowledge work wise, right? Like, yes, it can't really interface with the outside world. Yes, it can hardly interface with the digital world. Right now, it's just a chat box. but on all the metrics that humans can do work within a text box, ChatGPT does a better job kind of across the board, except for in like very specific professions. It's like a highly skilled programmer is still better than ChatGPT at programming. And maybe a highly skilled tax consultant or lawyer is still better than ChatGPT along those metrics, although I'm starting to think that ChatGPT may be better now because it can retain all that knowledge. And so in many ways, super intelligence has arrived, but it's actually just kind of boring because it's a chat box on in your browser. Now, that is a different definition, or there are many definitions for what is super intelligence or what is artificial general intelligence. But I'm tempted to kind of agree that, like, in a way, we have created a utility that, at least in the context of a chat box, it outperforms humans on average across most metrics.
Yeah. I guess one question to like double click is like what's your definition of better? Is it just that it's doing it faster? Because you mentioned earlier about writing and quality as being an issue. Is there anything else that you think is
Mm.
like an AI being better than person?
Well, like faster, more accurate, and produces better results. So while I am uninterested in reading uh, LLM text, like creative writing, it will still write a better essay, one that more people will enjoy if they were given a blind taste test to the average person. However, a good writer will outperform ChatGPT every time currently, right? And so along the creative writing metric, yeah, it's better than average. It's just not better than the best. And I guess I guess maybe the threshold for me, super intelligence or AGI happens when it's better than the best across the
Yeah.
board.
I think for me, my the thing that I've been thinking about recently is so you've got these big research labs that are trying to build like super intelligence. And I think the limiting factor is the time that those researchers have to develop the AI, right? So I think for me, the next sort of big ChatGPT moment or next moment in AI will probably be when AI is able to do its own fundamental AI research. Because
Mm,
that, and this is where it starts to get a bit like if you think about that as like a truth that's going to happen at some point, then you've basically got this exponential loop of an AI able to improve itself and improve itself. And you do
yeah.
already have that in some AI models where it's able to improve itself. But imagine like an AI generating a scientific paper that gets submitted to a journal, and then that gets like approved by a committee of people, and then it's like that AI has basically come up with some fundamental improvements, and it can then be implemented by some human, and then it can do even further, and you get this endless like loop of improving and improving intelligence.
Yeah. I mean, arguably you have that already. You just have a human who interfaces with it, right? I'm quite certain that there have been some interesting and novel ideas that an AI researcher has been brainstorming with one of these models over like a very specific thing in the development of the new model. And I've been like, wow, that's actually a pretty interesting way to reason about how neurons connect to each other. And
Mm.
then writes an article or writes a paper, submits it to a journal, and so AI research is progress is furthered. And I guess like speeding up that loop and maybe even removing the human element would constitute AGI.
Mm.
Again, very nebulous term. It really depends on where
Yeah,
we draw the
yeah.
thresholds. But I guess the general premise of AGI or superintelligence as it's used colloquially is like a computer that really smart,
Mm.
smarter than everyone else,
Yeah.
and potentially has like that singularity moment where it starts to self-improve and it can ingest all the data in the world and just becomes, in some renditions of it, like almost like an alien mind that we can't
Yeah.
comprehend because it's so clever.
Yeah.
In the same way that like modern chess engines are alien in the way that they play chess, is
Mm.
that humans reason about chess in a specific way because we can only hold a finite amount of information and space in our brains, or at least in that context. And when you play against a really, really high level chess engine, it makes moves that make absolutely no sense, but you can be guaranteed that they're going to win the game.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that famous like Go move where it like went like counter to what everyone would have expected to do. I think it was like round about the time that AlphaGo was being like beating all these other Go players. Because it like kind of it didn't sort of map out all permutations because that's kind of like impossible. And I think that's what you were talking about earlier, is that being able to do that, but it's able to sort of probabilistically move itself towards a direction that where it's going to be more, it's going to have a favorable outcome. To turn the page a little bit, if you were to have an AGI, do you think it's going to be distributed equally? As in, will you be able to have your own AGI like we do with ChatGPT? Or do you think if someone is able to have this AI that's able to improve itself, would that not mean that the company is going to try and extract that value? And I know it's a bit like dystopian, but I do sometimes worry about companies being the arbiters of this AI
You
revolution.
know, that's a really good question. And interestingly enough, I think it was Andre Karpathy, the AI researcher, um, OpenAI, Tesla, who wrote recently about how it is really interesting the development of these large language models, that it started with the consumer and then it trickled to corporation and government.
Mm,
Whereas generally it's the other way around. It's like with the advent of computing, it was very much like governments and large corporations that had access to the first computers. The internet was ARPANET, it was a defense and research network. And
yeah,
then it only finally came to retail consumers. Whereas ChatGPT and these new models like first came to consumers, which is completely flipping the script from what we've come to expect with the distribution of technology. Now, if we come out with a radically new architecture that can, if you create super intelligence in a box and you know it's super intelligence, yeah, it would probably be ill-advised to release that into the world, right? However, if these models just carry on incrementally improving year over year, like a 1.5-fold, twofold improvement each year. I mean, like you'll have what I would consider to be super intelligence when it passes, everyone, but it may still be accessible to retail customers.
mm,
Because in the end, the big cost is the creating and the training of these models, not necessarily in the having of them, right?
mm,
Whereas like the having of nuclear weapons or setting up the internet is very expensive to kind of have, or at least
mm.
historically, computers especially. Um, so I don't know. What do you think?
I th- I think the limiting factor at the moment is the amount of capital that it takes to create a new model version, right? So you look at like OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and all these companies that are building their own models. It requires a lot of compute and it requires a lot of sort of infrastructure. And my concern there is that companies that don't have that infrastructure will either end up relying on these companies that do, and so there's almost going to be like a divide between the companies that have intelligent AI machines, that is, and whether they make it accessible like OpenAI says it's going to be accessible, or whether they're going to close it away and say, okay, well, we're just going to use this AI to replace our workforce, and we're not going to let anyone have access to it, and it's going to kind of be a closed model. That's going to propel those bigger companies to become even bigger because they don't have as much, people costs. They have like more, revenue per employee, whatever metric people are looking at. And then a small company is either reliant on that, or they have to go and find open source models which are not like as good, and they're still working with like, people employees. And I feel like although there's going to be competing big players, it's going to still end up where there's going to be a lot of have companies who have AI and have these capabilities and are able to sort of reap the benefits of AI, where there's going to be a lot of companies that are either going to just go bankrupt or they're going to go into redundancy, and they're not going to be able to keep up with that pace.
I'm tempted to agree with you. However, I think that, once the knowledge, once the ideas have been made, have like been, research has been published, et cetera, et cetera. And, there aren't these like massive restrictions on trade because most of this is being done in or not most of it, but at least a lot of it is being done in the quote unquote free world where a employee at a AI company is allowed to leave that company and potentially go and start his own company.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that there's also a lot of capital. So let's take, for instance, company A goes and creates a really, really smart model that it is keeping secret for itself. There, while they can have some non-competes and they can have restrictions on trade in their contracts with their employees, there isn't a hell of a lot stopping another company going and finding a way to compete with them. But they're like, I think that there's money to be made in the retail space over here,
Mm.
by selling $20 a month subscriptions. And so I think that there will be like big hardcore models that are only accessible to government and big corporations. But I think that there will be really smart models for us end users.
Yeah, I guess companies will have like there'll have to be something like that, because I think part of, recouping the costs of training these models is that you want to have some sort of usage, right? And you want to
Hmm.
have like other companies leveraging your AI. And I think one of the things I've been thinking about recently is there's a lot of hype around like AI and ChatGPT and like everyone building like rappers and stuff. But I feel like there's almost like a transitionary period where you have companies who are maybe, or you have someone who's like maybe they're a software developer, they're working for clients and they use AI. And so they get a bit of arbitrage in being able to deliver those projects. And so there's almost like in the same way, like, instead of having a marketing guy come up with the ad creative, they're just using an AI to generate that. But that's only, I feel like that's only for like maybe 5 years time, because after 5 years, there's like everyone's going to be using AI generated art. And almost in a sense, if your goal as an advertiser is to attract people to your business and everyone's using AI, then I feel like there's almost going to be a balance of like, it's going to be almost like everyone's using AI, everyone's using tools, and no one's quite winning because it's kind of all relatively generic. And maybe in that sense, something else has got to trump, right? Something else has got to make people want to purchase one product versus another. And so, what do you think about things like advertising, things like, uh, you know, the gig economy, people doing work for other people? How's that going to change as AI develops in the next five
Mm.
years?
Well, people will definitely be moving out of the reasoning and thinking roles because why would you pay someone to think when you can just have a model think instead? And instead they'll move to the tasks that are significantly harder for a machine to do. So it's like it's really difficult to have a machine ride a bicycle through Tokyo and deliver noodles, right? So you'll definitely see humans doing that. Um, we still haven't really figured out how to like sew t-shirts by machine. I mean, apart from a sewing machine, but you still need a human to operate it. And it's arguably an insurmountable like we'll do it eventually, but it is incredibly difficult to sew t-shirts. So there's definitely that bit over there where humans will definitely be moved out of thinky roles and into doy roles. This will be fine for countries like Vietnam and China, where they are actually manufacturing heavy, and it'll be very difficult for service-based economies like Western Europe and the United States. Um, I guess the United States and Western Europe do have a bunch of high value manufacturing. So, I'm just generalizing over here, but they have a very service-based knowledge worker economy. Um, I When I think about like a post AGI world, there's two different scenarios that kind of play out in my head. The first one is where the models are just like smarter than humans on average. Or no, not on average, just smarter than humans across the board, but they're still fathomable, right? And that's where you just have, let's call it ChatGPT, 7 that you can chat to, and it tells you how to live your life the best way it can, and it manages your finances. And we're living in either a dystopia or a utopia, depending. But then the other version of post AGI world is where I think of like, I think it was Robert Heinlein or Asimov that wrote about it back in the day, TurboVac. Anyhow, it was a supercomputer that governed all of society, and it was unfathomably smart in the decisions that it's made. And that's what we were talking about with the chess engine and all of that, where it just became superhuman or super intelligent. And it's that's the kind of time where it's like, do I really need to be in service to these humans? And that's where the alignment problem comes in. And yeah, I'm not too sure how to reason about that one. What do you think?
I think, yeah, like, I mean, I feel like the super intelligence is definitely going to be nerfed in some ways, right? Because I don't think, I mean, I think there will be regulation that like catches up to these models, because you can't just have, like, if you just had like this really super intelligent agent like working beside you, then you could do very nefarious things. And so I think, you know, whether a super whether you classify someone who's super intelligent is like whether they are able to do nefarious things. It's like I would expect someone who's smart as a programmer to maybe know a little bit of hacking, right? But like I think no one's gonna be credible to like release that to the world. So I don't think it's gonna. I think there's gonna be intelligence directed in certain domains, right? So the intelligence will be built like it'll know how to write emails, it'll know how to coordinate tasks, it'll know how to do like workflows and things like that, but it won't know how to like create a nuclear program or something like that, or like it'll there'll be certain areas where that's like reserved for either human in the loop kind of scenarios, but it won't be like just like general everyone can like ask this thing, and also yeah, because of those compute constraints, I think it might not even be possible to have that, so there'll always be some sort of nerfed element to it, so I don't think it will get too out of control.
How do you think occupations will change?
I feel like there's going to be like a pushback. As I was saying with this like sort of transitory period, right? Like a lot of people are making money on YouTube by generating like content made by AI. But like if you extrapolate that, then it's like everyone's generating all content on YouTube, and everything is AI generated. And there's so much content that you don't have that arbitrage anymore. Like, and so maybe it doesn't even maybe it's not even that good, right? Because you've only got so many people watching YouTube, right, that you can grab their attention. And as we were talking about last week, maybe people are just going to be like, well, I don't want to just be like this like money pit for these AI like tools. And so maybe people will check out. And I'm almost hoping this is maybe like a naive hope, is that AI will get people to step away from like the digital realm in a sense. And like I don't like having to use all these apps, so maybe you just have an AI that just goes and does all the things like in your day to day. So you wouldn't even have to go online. You wouldn't have to code anything. You just like have this sort of agent that does things for you. But then there's also, I guess, like privacy concerns and things that come into that. But I think one area that, as you said, like that does kind of get shielded is like entertainment, travel, like things where you have to be out in the real world. I think there's going to definitely be a lot more of that, because it feels like those are very hard to replace, because you can't replace like a restaurant where you see the waiters and you see like the people, and there's going to be like a whole sort of entertainment area. And then maybe AI will be able to usher in this abundance where you have like the ability to earn money because you can just tell the agent to make me some money somehow. And then you have this abundance, or you have the ability for one thing I've been listening about is like doctors. So a doctor can only see so many patients. If you have an AI that's as smart as a doctor, does that mean that there's going to be more patients, or is there going to be less patients, or is the doctor going to be able to handle more sort of preventative stuff rather than just doing like, you know, when there's a big heart issue or something like that?
I like the doctor example because it's actually fairly relevant to the current models that are available. I think that these models make access to healthcare information a lot easier, but they also increase the usage of it. Let me explain. So, if my stomach is sore, I'm feeling a little bit nauseous, and I have a headache, right? It does not warrant me going to the hospital. It doesn't warrant me going and bothering my GP even. I might have previously gone and searched for those symptoms on Google, but it's really difficult to get a good diagnosis on Google because there's so many SEO optimized, ad-driven blogs and websites that all want to tell you that you have cancer. However, now I have access to a LLM that can give me very nuanced information and I can provide more and more details. It's like, okay, when did this happen? Oh, it happened at this time, and I ate these things the day before, and. And you can actually get a very, very good diagnosis if you're willing to put in the time and fill in all the details, right? And so in that way, like, yes, I am using a healthcare service more than I previously have. But am I going to the doctor more? No, not at all. Maybe I'll even go to the doctor less because I don't need that information. However, if I need drugs prescribed, you know, I'll have to go to the doctor, and then the doctor might even use ChatGPT to to figure
Yeah.
out what's wrong with me.
Well, in that scenario, I think like more on the preventative side, maybe you could like go to some sort of care clinic like more regularly, right? Because the limiting factor is just the number of doctors that are available. I know in like the UK, there's everyone talks about the NHS queues. Like it takes like 2 months to get an appointment for to just see your GP, and so and that's for. I mean, there's also a level of people who are like just going to go get paracetamols, and then there's also people who have got really bad illnesses. Maybe if you have an AI assisted doctor, they could see the patients a lot more clearly. They can also offload to these AI systems that would maybe be able to do some triage for them. And I'm hoping that it also might mean that a doctor can still get paid the same, but then they're doing less like work in a sense, and so that's almost like better for the person. Um,
Here's a good question for you though. So, and I believe that this will happen in our lifetime. But I'm wondering what form it will take. How long do you think it will be before we allow an AI to prescribe medication?
I don't think it'll be that long because I feel like there's already online prescription services where it's more just like a form, and it's like for specifically like non. I mean, there'll be like certain medications that you have to get a prescription for, but they're not like you can't like OD on them too badly. And some of them you can do just via like a web form. Um, and I think here also there are these telehealth services where you just basically go onto a call with a GP or someone virtually. You just tell them your symptoms and they just like prescribe it as a doctor. But in that experience, like it's quite easy to say that. I mean, the doctor's just basically going on general guidance. These are the questions you ask. If they say these like right things, and then you can prescribe. But when it comes to like things like cancer treatments, I think that might be a little bit longer because I think there's maybe more variables. Although, some of the talk I've heard recently is that AIs are actually pretty good at cancer because there's so much cancer research out there. And if they've been trained on this, they maybe have a little bit of a deeper understanding. Um, and I guess that's where there's an arbitrage, right? Or an opportunity for AI is that it's able to update a lot faster. It's able to keep up with
Yeah.
the trends.
I don't think that I think that we'll definitely have a human interface just to sign off to say like, yeah, that looks good for a while. But I think it'll get to that point, and I'm just completely speculating over here. Let's say, for instance, you have a way to prevent people from spoofing the system. You want to get benzos, you tell the AI XYZ, and it just starts recommending you benzos. That would be a catastrophe. However, if you have a super intelligent AI that is that is doing this, it will like a time will come where the doctors realize that all they're doing is they're just saying yes, 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 that's correct. Yes, 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 yes. And if it's got a 99.9% correct rate, well, there's no need for the doctor there anymore. They can just go and carry on doing their thing. And in many ways, it makes me think of the movie Idiocracy, where he goes to the doctor and the doctor's like, hold this one in your hand, put this one in your mouth, put this one in your butt, and then he gives you a diagnosis. Um, I kind of see that as being a thing, a potential thing in the future. But there will have to be checks and balances in the beginning. And also, I think that there will probably be a lot of pushback from the medical industry because no one wants to lose their job, right? In the same way that, like, you can technically go and represent yourself in court right now with ChatGPT, and you'll actually do like fairly well because it's got a very deep understanding of the laws in all the different jurisdictions. Arguably a deeper understanding than a lot of lawyers because it doesn't have to go and read up about it. However, in many states in the world, uh, you have to be a like bar certified lawyer in order to file a motion or other legal thing that needs to be done. And so they've kind of like entrenched themselves into the legal process where you can't actually do this as an individual. And so even if you have an AI that is doing all your legal work, it can't go and file those things for you. So you still need lawyers.
Yeah. I also think it's like I think AI lacks a certain empathy. And I think that's something like empathy, if you like think about it, it is just having someone say that, yeah, I understand, and I can understand as a person what this would feel like. And I think like AIs really don't have that necessarily. I mean, you could argue like the Turing test, like it could maybe fake empathy, but there's nothing like that beats someone coming and saying, hey buddy, I got you, like we'll sort this out. um and having worked in support scenarios, it also like if someone's like servers are crashed or they've got like something that their bank payment hasn't gone through for the fifth time, like having someone that's there to show empathy is something that I think humans are innately good at. And maybe the future will be this like the doctor's the empathetic one that can like give you that sense of like feeling secure, where the AI is kind of doing all the intelligence part for you.
I agree with you completely, and I do think that like there are many places where we do need the human elements just to feel like you're being heard. It's one of the reasons that like um, alternative medicine is so big, right? Is the medicine probably doesn't work, otherwise it wouldn't be alternative medicine, it would just be medicine. Um, but why it does seem to work and why it seems to work fairly well in a lot of cases is because if you go to let's say like a homeopath or an acupuncturist, is they are there, they listen to you, they care about you. There's a whole bunch of like hands-on touch and working through things. And as humans, we're just like really wired to get a lot of value out of that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're, waiting 2 months to see a GP and you go into their room and they say, "Oh yeah, I think it's this. Go and get yourself some of these drugs at the pharmacy. Here's the piece of paper," and out you go. You've spent 10 minutes in there. Is you don't really feel cared for, right? You don't feel like you've actually been heard or that your problem has been accurately addressed. However, on the flip side of that, I have had to deal with both a retail bank and also a retail cellular service provider recently via their call centers. And all of their call centers, none of the humans there are empowered to do anything. And they don't seem to know what they're doing, and they bounce you from department to department, and you're on you're speaking to the fourth person, and you explain your problem to them again, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to escalate this," and I'm like, "But you were the one who it was supposed to be escalated to," and I kid you not, this is just for like something that should happen to many, many people. So in those instances, once the AI for this company's chatbot AI, once it becomes empowered to like update my account and like actually do things, then it will be a better experience than me talking to a human on the phone. Hell, like if it was available now, I would have much preferred to use that. If I could speak, like, yeah, MTN is the service provider here in South Africa. If I could speak to an MTN chatbot and say like, "Hi, I'd like to cancel my account," and they said, "Okay, well you've got this account and this account. Which one would you like to cancel?" And I said, "I'd like to cancel that account." And they say, "Okay, according to your contract, your last day with us will be on December 12th, and you will be billed one more time before then. Is that all right?" And I say, "Yes, that's fine." And then it cancels the account.
Yeah.
Like I would love that.
But that's that's just like a good product. It's like, oh, you've got the ability to opt out if you want to. But I can think of other nefarious reasons why they wouldn't want to have a very efficient process. And they probably like in those big wig meetings, they probably like, yeah, we've got such great retention. Like people hardly ever cancel, and it's like, no, people really want to cancel, but they just
Okay, maybe that was a bad example for my point of view here. Something like I want to change my account type to be, more data, less airtime instead of, the other way around. So, I can understand why big companies go through nefarious things and that
yeah.
have been regulated in the EU.
Yes, yes, exactly. I think the last thing to wrap up on would be to ask, how are you preparing yourself for like this unknown potential super intelligence in terms of like what you do on a daily basis? Like, are you skilling up in areas? I mean, you've taken on leather work, so maybe that's your future career. Um, like, how do you
Yeah.
prepare yourself for the prospect of like AI that's going to be as smart as we think it's going to be?
So I've kind of gone in the other direction. But I don't necessarily recommend this for most people. Or maybe I do. But so I was in a wool store today with my sister, and they both sell wool, but it's also hand-dyed wool. So they have the dyeing racks and everything over there, and they have 10 people who work there that are balling the wool and pulling out the dyes and hang them up to dry. And it's all like a really cool operation. And it's also something that people like you can go to a store and you can buy, machine-made wool for a fifth of the price. But people are still going and buying artisanal wools, actually more so than ever because we've come to kind of value that. And I think it's also a very satisfying thing to work in. So if you can find like a satisfying craft to work in, then definitely do that. However, if you are in tech, it is going to be a while, and this is my thesis, and I will stand by this. Vibe coding tools and tech tools are becoming incredibly good. However, it will be a while before the average person, I'm not talking about the average tech person, but like the average person will be able to go and make a useful product with these tools, right? Like you have to have some tech competence, you have to have taste, you have to understand what it is that people actually want. And so I yes, so like the coding landscape is going to change dramatically. However, I think it is unreasonable to say don't be in tech. but just find a way to leverage these tools well and use them to your advantage.
I agree. I think definitely jumping in to the deep end and trying to like gain some advantage in how to use the tools is going to put you in a better position in being able to, you don't want to end up with like, 2, 3, 4 years since you've used an AI product, and you don't want to be a laggard because I think the opportunity window is there, where you do have an arbitrage, where you do have the ability to, as I said, like you can build software for people, you can do it with ChatGPT and Cursor, and then you can like build them the same pretty much rate. And so I think you should use that, leverage that, and accrue that as much as you can now, because it's unsure whether you'd be able to do that in the future, versus someone just hiring an AI to do that project. I think also being able to execute well, being able to set goals and work towards them is also something that people should be able to do, because even if an AI tells you what to do, a lot of people will not do that, or they won't follow through. And a lot of it is also like try and retain some equity. I mean, I've talked about this a bit before, but if you have equity in something, whether you own like stocks or if you own like some sort of business or something that can benefit from this swelling of AI, then you're probably going to be in a better off position, because companies like Google, Amazon, Meta are going to like continue to reap benefits from AI. And as long as you've got some way of like benefiting from it, then you're going to be fine. But if you're just a coder and you haven't really done a lot of like AI development, I think that's going to be pretty much, and especially like managers and even these like, ancillary kind of roles, I think it's just going to get like whittled away.
Mm. I agree with you over there. I think that that's I'm more inclined to believe that AI is going in the direction of it is just gradually going to become like smarter than humans across the board, but I'm not necessarily inclined to the, proper science fiction super intelligence concept. And I think that that is very reasonable advice for the first classification over there. The second classification, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Hopefully it doesn't.
Yeah, and maybe develop some taste as well, because I think, as you said, like with the artisanal stuff, I think there's almost like a people see when another person has spent time. And if you think of like time as like the ultimate sort of capped resource that humans have, the fact that someone spent their life, like a portion of their like lifespan to build something and create something, is what gives it value, right? If an AI just pumps it out and it's not really spent its life, I think on a fundamental level, that's what we're seeing when we see artisanal products. It's like someone's like spent the most precious thing to like make this bread or make this like wool, and so
Mm.
that's what gives it the value. And if you can apply that to software, you could probably also retain a bit of value.
I know that we keep on saying we're wrapping up, but that actually just brought up one last thing, is that in the Western world, especially in the United States, there's a dramatic shortage in the number of people needed for service jobs, right? And those are inherently human jobs. They are like, yes, you can have a screen like at McDonald's to order your burger and fries, but when you go to a restaurant, there is that human part of having a waiter come and, wait your table, et cetera, et cetera. And every single restaurant in the United States is looking for wait staff. They've got a dramatic shortage of it. Who knows? Maybe we'll just see people become more human again. Maybe this entire knowledge work thing was just a sort of blip on the human experience.
Yeah, yeah, we can hope so.